I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Michael Kimmelman. Michael Kimmelman, the architecture critic of the New York Times, was born and raised in New York City, educated at Yale and Harvard, and was the Times' longtime chief art critic before moving to Berlin for several years to write a column on cultural and political affairs across Europe and the Middle East. A best-selling author and pianist in his other life, and I've heard him play. He teaches at Columbia University and is a contributor to the New York Review of Books. Please welcome a hero of the IPA, a true New Yorker, Michael Kimmelman.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm not going to play the piano this morning, but I'm very happy to be here, and I just want to give a shout out to Jonathan and the IPA. It's such an amazing thing you do, and under, with so few resources, the fact that you pull this together, and as you've done so many things for the city is anyway, just great. And it's great to see you all here too. And I was really fascinated by that first panel. This is the 140th anniversary of the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, I think on Wednesday. And, when you think back to the things that made New York, you really think of sort of massive infrastructural, physical projects. The city grid in 1811. If you think about that, it's an extraordinary achievement in that it began in one generation and finished almost a century later. So it was a project that had the commitment of city administrations and communities over many generations. People began something that they would never see finished, and that really changed the city in many good and bad ways, but fundamentally created New York City as we know it as an economic capital. And as a city that became a model for other cities around the world, Central Park. And the Brooklyn Bridge, too, was, a project that was hard to imagine now. The scale of it, the complexity of it, buildings were 3-4 stories high at that time. This was an object that was looming over New York in a way, it was like building a mountain floating over the East River. It was extraordinary. There was enormous amount of opposition. There was scandal involved, Tammany Hall, and there was scandal around the steel that was used and so forth. It was 3 times over budget and took 3 times as long as it was supposed to take. So there was enormous pushback. And when it opened, the celebration was, according to someone who lived long enough to see the moon landing, far greater than the celebration that Neil Armstrong had when he had his ticker tape parade down New York City. And now we look at the bridge as a kind of emblem, I think, of what New York aspires to create an extraordinary work of foresight and engineering, inspiration and art, something that is about the unification of the city. It tied the city together, Brooklyn and New York and Manhattan, and it foreshadowed the literal unification of the boroughs. It came at a time, I'll just remind you, when we saw within the framework of those few years when the bridge was built, the completion of the Transcontinental Railway, the completion of the cable across the Atlantic, the building of the Suez Canal, all of them I think are and the invention of the light bulb and the telephone, period of enormous change and innovation and hope. And I say all that because I think we live in a very, very different moment. And I think as we face the challenge of talking about something like the BQE, we approach it in a very different spirit. Much of the conversations that we have these days are about recounting our mistakes of the past, about trying to sort of rectify things that we did not have the foresight or that we were too blinkered or racist to recognize. And that's important. And I'm so glad that today in the first panel, conversations came up, especially at the end, around equity and housing. As much as I admire what's happened in Seattle and that waterfront I've been to, and I've been to Madrid and many of these other places where waterfronts have come down, I'm glad that Adam mentioned these are places that have not built affordable housing and have increased some of the inequities in those cities. So I'm glad that it came up here, that should be a priority. And I know that will come up in conversations forthcoming. I'm glad the conversation mentioned community land trusts and protections against displacement. I think that's very crucial. I also think it's really crucial that we have a certain humility about what we think the future should bring. I don't have the time now to go into the whole history of Westway, but I like to repeat it for people because Westway is still by many people regarded as a project that was a triumph of community resistance to large-scale planning. But I'll tell you, as somebody who grew up in a household that opposed Westway when I was a boy, I look back on that as one of the great curiosities, if not failures. It would have taken down the West Side Highway, built a tunnel to move that highway underwater, created 50 blocks of green space, new housing, parks, bike lanes, pedestrian paths. And it was opposed as a great handout to developers. And it was also seen as a handout to drivers because the money should be going to public transit, even though the sources of those money came from two separate places. I see, 1 minute, yeah. So I just want to say, you know, when we look back on Moses and the highway system as well, I'm the last person to defend Robert Moses. But there were reasons why, in the early years of the last century, the idea of building highways and cars and creating mobility was not seen as reactionary and simply a way of driving highways through poor neighborhoods. It was also seen as a way of saving New York's economy and moving ahead. So as we think about all of this, and we think 2053 or whatever it is, 2075, we need to be realistic perhaps. I think we have to also really come together around the broad range of issues, and that includes probably the interests of all of those people who are driving trucks and many of the people who own cars and living in parts of the city where those highways are the only connections because they're not well connected by public transit now. Let us make sure that this is a holistic, truly inclusive conversation, one that focuses around issues of equity, but that also does not presume that we have all the answers right now, that all of the priorities that we are setting at this moment are necessarily going to be the ones that are going to solve this problem for everyone else. And the last thing I want to say is, much as we hate Moses, all of these projects, whether they're the Brooklyn Bridge or the city grid or the highway system or whatever Moses was doing, came from very strong leadership. You need somebody in City Hall and in the State House who is going to own this. If not, we're talking to each other, and we've been in this bubble for a while. Joan mentioned that she was talking about this in 1993. That's 30 years ago, and we're sitting here now. Governor's Island is a model. I've gone over a minute, I know, but give me 10 seconds more. Governor's Island, I think, is a really interesting model, right? This is a place in the process of change, but it's also an island, and that has made it a lot easier, I think about change that can happen here without affecting other people. So I just want to say, I think this is a great occasion. I'm so glad everybody is coming together. I'm so glad this is not just talking about the cantilever, the solution to which is fix it now, Joan, and then let's move on. It's not an either-or option. But having said that, we need to all really look for leadership around this and then have the humility and ability to come together around decisions which aren't perfect for any of us, but prioritize those who are most underserved. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael. It's interesting that you mentioned 30 years ago we were talking about a tunnel, and here we are in 2023 talking about 2053. So hopefully we can get our act together in the next 10 years so we can enjoy the next 20. Okay, so we're just going to go right into the next panel. This is panel 2, Community Voices Towards an Environmentally Just and Equitable Future. This panel includes representatives from 5 different community groups describing the challenges and opportunities facing their communities along the BQE and exploring their visions for a just and equitable future. We have a lot of people speaking today. Our moderator is Claudia Herasme. She is an urban designer and strategist, and she was the chief urban designer at the New York City Department of City Planning, and most recently, managing deputy commissioner at DPD of the city of Chicago. Great. Our first speaker is Karen Blondel. She was a Harvard Loeb Fellow in 2022. She's an environmental justice public housing activist. She's a Public Housing Civic Association co-founder and Red Hook West Resident Association president. Our next speaker will be Quincy Phillips. He is a Hub Fellow at the Red Hook Initiative, and his colleague Kiyana, Slade, lead youth organizer at Red Hook, will be joining the panel discussion. Noely Reyes is a community organizer from Mixteca organization. Cindy McLaughlin is a member of the Board of Governors and chair of the Public Realm Committee of Brooklyn Heights Association. Daniela Castillo is the program manager for the Green Light District at El Puente. And Reyna, founding principal of Reyna Strategic Consulting, is the former deputy BP of Brooklyn and former New York City Council member. So we're going to start with Karen Blondel. Thank you, Karen.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the IPA and for all the elected officials, architects, planners who are here today. I'm here not with a EIS, but with a CIS. I believe we need community impact statements in regards to these infrastructure issues that we're concerned with today. When you talk about Lenapes and Canarses, you're talking about me. You have us right here in the room. This isn't third party. We're still in existence. What I think has been happening across the United States is that from the time of emancipation, we have been disorientated in my community. We've been disorientated by being moved from place to place. We moved from public housing and Indian housing into tenement housing, from tenement housing into 10 cities, from 10 cities into public housing. Public housing is public architect and infrastructure. Most public housing is, as you heard from the previous speakers, located in these areas where we have a lot of high rates of asthma, particle matter 2.5 everywhere. But I also want to bring to your attention that how I got into this work was through the New York State DOT had a program called the Joint Urban Manpower Program. And so I decided to sign up to non-traditional work for women, and I signed up at 40 years old. And I knew I wasn't gonna go out there on a construction site and be lifting sheetrock, but I knew that I still could do math. And so I was given this opportunity to become a computer-aided drafter and designer, as well as a construction inspector through a New York State DOT program called the Joint Urban Manpower Program. We need that program and your collaboration back to attach and connect my community to the creators of the built environment. Going back to when I was actually in the school, I was working for Hardesty in Hanover. And one of the first blueprints that I worked on was for Governor's Island back in 2008. And I was just looking at this amazing space that even though my aunt was married to a Coast Guard lawyer, I had never visited as a native New Yorker. My aunt spent many years here up until 1996 with her husband, but I had never visited Governor's Island. So to be able to know that I was actually working on those blueprints with the mitigation and adaptation required to be what it is today, and know that my name is on those blueprints, I want to encourage other public housing residents, other young people, to look at these paths and to join you guys. When I come in these rooms, a lot of times I'm alone. And for that reason, I feel like every time I raise my hand, you guys should be calling on me, because I'm representing a huge a portion of the residents here in New York City. 1 in 15 New Yorkers live in public housing. We have to find a way to not just talk about the racism, the redlining that was done in the past, because it's still being done today. Redlining takes on different forms. I know that we've talked in the past in my advocacy about construction as eviction. Remember that when you talk about tearing down the BQE. Just going through the phases that we're going through for resiliency in Red Hook right now has my brain like this. There is constant noise. I don't think anybody really looks at the amount of noise it takes for you to adapt and mitigate these locations. To move a loafer from the side of a building is not done like Bewitched. It's just not. It takes planning. It takes notifications going up, letting residents like me know, hey, we're gonna be making a lot of noise today. We had to endure this through the pandemic in Red Hook. We had a $500 million job going on, okay? And of course we wanna be resilient. We're not gonna ever leave Red Hook. But at the same time, we have to do this with the boots on the ground, talking to people like me who can tell you where the glitches are, where the issues are. You guys do all the planning, the specifications, and you walk away. We're left with the contractors. And at that point, they're cutting down 500 trees. I want to be able to come back to you immediately and say, hold on, they just took out 500 trees. And why I need to say that is because as we're talking about the pollution from the BQE, we have the MSC, which is a huge cruise ship that pulled up into Red Hook. So we cannot look at one thing with all its passion and not see the other thing. We have to have peripheral vision and be able to look forward into the future as well. And so that's why I created the Public Housing Civic Association. It is not off the ground yet, but I'm working on it. The Public Housing Civic Association wants to be a connection to you guys and to your fellowships so that we can have residents from public housing, starting with Red Hook and Gowanus as the model, and we can create mentors and mentees under these programs. No one can tell me that a place like Red Hook with 3,000 apartments doesn't have at least 10 architects, 5 planners, 10 lawyers, 5 police officers, all there in the mix. So please help me out. Think about before you destroy, think about what that feels like on the ground, and make sure you have community impact statements. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I just want to start off by thanking Karen, my fellow Red Hook resident / president, for speaking just now. You made a bunch of good points. I also want to thank Janet for giving Red Hook the platform to represent us and our issues with the BQE and stuff like that. Now, before I get started, by a show of hands, I'm just wondering, who's here live in Red Hook or has heard of Red Hook? Right. My name is Quincy Phillips, and I'm representing the Red Hook Initiative. I am a community organizer here, and I'm joined by my colleague, who's going to introduce herself.
My name is Kiyana Slade. I'm the lead youth organizer at the Red Hook Initiative.
So, do you want to click on the slides? We are a community-based organization here in Red Hook, Brooklyn. We've been serving the community for well over 21 years. We've been serving a lot of young people and family. There's a barcode on the slide, which I will go back to. If you have cell service, you can scan the barcode, and it'll take us to the RHI website. Can you go back? Cool. So we've been working on this BQE visioning process since February, and we're doing this to document the community priorities. We conducted a study, and we had gotten well over 600 responses to people who either worked in Red Hook, lived in Red Hook, or just be around Red Hook. Some of the things we did to get their input is we went to after-school dismissals, we did school presentations, one-on-one conversations with people. It was just really important that we got like the people's input about the problems that's being represented on BQE. You know the BQE is right next to Red Hook. Like you can't even, you have to pass it in order to get into Red Hook, you know, and that's not done on accident.
So what we found out was no surprise, you know, to our community. We figured out that, you know, it's something that needs to be implemented. It's been, for me, as I've lived in Red Hook for a while, and it's always been looking like it's been worked on, like they're still working on it. So when we conducted this survey and stuff, it made me think like, wow, how long is it gonna take to actually do this? I've been crossing this for 20 years, and no work is actually being done. So basically, you know, that comes from like, you know, that's some systemic racism that grounds the BQE. We know that, right? So like just keeping that in mind, we continue to get the community's input and letting them know that their voices is needed to be heard because they are using this, the BQE on a daily basis.
A lot of the people from Red Hook, they feel like their voices aren't heard, you know, so this gave them a great platform to speak their minds and to tell us the issues that they faced. Some of the major key issues that, you know, a lot of the people talked about was how unsafe they felt while crossing it, especially by Hamilton Avenue. You only have about like 20 seconds to pass, and it's like two sides of the bridge. Like it takes more than that to pass, and by the time we get to the first half, we already run out of time. We have to wait for the next light, you know? So that's a huge issue that people were reporting.
And also, like, some of you guys brought up Robert Moses and the plan of, like, cutting off, like, Red Hook, which would cut us off of resources as well.
Not to mention about the last mile like situation that's happening in our neighborhood. Amazon is taking over the back of Red Hook, which creates a lot of air pollution to people who are probably asthmatic, who can't breathe. Red Hook is full of older people. You know, older people have more trouble breathing. It's just not safe for them. You know, it's a huge problem. And it's the same way by the BQE. Like the air pollution over there is absolutely nasty. You know. It's a huge problem. And then that's in addition to like the lack of lighting that, you know, it gets really dark after 8 o'clock. People can't even see, you know, people have a hard time crossing. They don't know what car is going to come by. Like, you know, it's just a lot of issues that we need to fix, you know.
Yeah, so our main takeaways, we took away a lot from the survey, which we really appreciate everyone who took the survey or like even participated. And please make sure to scan when we get it back on. Please make sure to scan and check out our website and see, because the work that was done was actually done by youth, and it, you know, the impact is really, 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 really amazing. In the report.
Red Hook is a community. Like, we see each other as family. We're small, but we're mighty, you know, so we're gonna work together in order to make changes that we need in our neighborhood. So yeah, with our work moving forward, we just wanna just continue to do the right thing, you know. We care about the people out there. you know, everyone is important to us. And, you know, if there's issues that's happening in our neighborhood, we'll do everything in our power to either combat it or stop it.
So, how many of you guys joined the meetings in the Sunset, at Sunset Park when they had the meetings? The DOE, the BQE meetings that they had at Sunset. Okay. So we also learned. So we also learned some. We was able to gather like some information from there and correlate it to our information, and we found it like, wait, hold on, this is amazing. Like, so we really do appreciate like even being able to speak up here. We kind of shy.
But we thank you guys, and
Thank you.
and like I said, thank you for giving Red Hook, you know, the platform that we need in order to, you know, raise awareness about our area. So thank you so much.
Okay, hi, good morning. My name is Noely Reyes, the community organizer at Mixteca organization. We're located in Sunset Park, but we're also next to Park Slope. Just a little background on me. I'm currently enrolled in John Jay College, majoring in human services. I will be receiving my bachelor's at the end of this month, so graduation is 2 weeks. Thank you. I started Mixteca as an intern, moved up as a community advocate, and now I'm the community organizer. So very excited for what's to come. I'm a strong believer in advocating for the community's rights and equity. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Janet, for offering Mixteca the platform today to speak. My efforts to promote education and information on immigrant rights in my community, as I am the immigration coordinator. Just a little background on Mixteca, mainly Spanish-speaking immigrant communities for more than 20 years. We're also a navigation center for asylum seekers, which is a very big topic in New York City right now. And Mixteca organization was spun off as a campaign to increase awareness for HIV, AIDS prevention to the Latino community. Before Mixteca, it was very hard for community members in the area to have health services. That's where our 4 pillars came from. We offer these current 4 pillars at Mixteca: mental health, health, education, and immigration. So that is something that we offer to the community members completely free. And just a little background on what Mixteca is. And so today I'm here to express my unwavering support for our community's effort in advocating for a BQE that promotes environmental justice and equity. Together, we aim to create a sustainable and promising future for all. At Mixteca, our mission centers around empowering Latinx and indigenous immigrants in New York City, facilitating their access to vital services, and enhance their quality of life and foster sustainable social and economic development through a diverse range of programs and services tailored in the specific needs of immigrant families. We strive to cultivate a supportive environment that nurtures the growth of our community. One of Mixteca's most impactful initiatives is our Mercadito Solidario, or food distribution, which this is a remarkable event that happens every Saturday that addresses the pressing issues of food insecurities by providing fresh and nutritious foods to over 150 families on a weekly basis. By offering access to healthy foods and goods, with resilience in the face of adversity. During our Mercadito, we strive not only to provide goods, but to let members know about what BQE is, what's the beautification project that's to come. And our aim is to encourage more community members to participate in workshops where they can voice their thoughts and concerns. By doing so, they can help shape the changes that we hope to bring about for the betterment of our community's future. So we let the community members know about the BQE workshops that happens in the schools nearby. Most community members were not aware of this, so we make sure that we handed out the flyers, like, oh, there's a workshop this Saturday, this Thursday, in person, and it's in your school communities actually, so participate and you'll connect and meet other people who also have these questions and doubts about what the BQE is. Mixteca is also actively engaged in workshops and outreach programs, working diligently to advocate for a beautification project that will not only enhance the physical aesthetics of our community, but also generate tangible benefits for those residing in proximity to the BQE. Our unwavering commitment to this cause is grounded in a deep-rooted belief in the power of community-driven initiatives and collaborative decision-making process. So some feedback that we got from community. So like we said, the workshops we participated in, we do outreaches, and in our packets that we have right there, we include BQE inform like flyers that will like let them know what the BQE is in just like small papers. This is the community feedback. We're located in Sunset Park, so we're known for like the big Sunset Park. So that's where we do most of our outreaches to. And this is just some community feedback that we've gotten and highlighted that these were like the most common thoughts of community members. So what community members want is inclusivity. So our community members value inclusivity in decision-making and post-implementations. Members should feel ownership, pride, and cultural identity reflected in the new infrastructures, designs, arts, and activities. Open spaces. Community desires more family-friendly open spaces. Recreation areas for children and families will enhance community well-being and happiness. So aside from the big park, they want more open spaces. Street safety, which I've heard from the Red Hook Initiative, is similar to ours. Community concern focuses on street safety and its impact. Traffic management measures like calming techniques and pedestrian-friendly infrastructures improve safety and quality of life. So overall, by prioritizing inclusivity, open spaces for families, and addressing street safety concerns, we can create a more vibrant and livable community that meets the needs and aspirations of its residents. Also, as a resident of Sunset Park, I went to Sunset Park High School, so it's on 4th Avenue, and our home field is, I played soccer, so our home field is Bush Terminal, 1st Avenue. So every year I'd have to beat the light to get to 3rd Avenue across the block to make it to my game. And as a 16-year-old, you just want to run, but that's not safe. Don't do that. It's a pleasure and honor to be here as well to speak as someone not only that works for Mixteca in Sunset Park, but I also live in Sunset Park. So it's for my community and everybody else around that area. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cindy McLaughlin. I chair the Public Realm Committee on the board of the Brooklyn Heights Association. I am a climate worker, and I've been in sustainable cities for the last about 7 years. I live about 35 feet from the BQE. I've got a kid with asthma, so this is both professional and personal for me. So the BHA has been advocating for years now for a transformed BQE. We also were the founding member of the Coalition for the BQE Transformation, which includes all the neighborhood groups up and down BQE Central and Cobble Hill. So both organizations are calling for true transformation, so not a retread of the same toxic highway that we have today. We want something more human scale that prioritizes health, climate, and community reconnection. So I'm going to just sort of zoom out a little bit here. So streetcars and other rail transit, if you go to Adam Paul Sussenek's website, Segregation by Design, you see these amazing images of trains before Robert Moses and trains after Robert Moses. And effectively, you know, streetcars used to be ubiquitous around the outer boroughs, absolutely ubiquitous. And in the mid-1900s, Robert Moses made the awful choice to defund public transit and fund urban highways. to bring people into the city center by car coming from New York's suburbs. And so to give them places to park, once they got here, he also gave over our entire public realm to 3 million on-street parking spaces that are free. And they've brought terrible harm to everyone who lived here. So they're a faucet funneling millions of cars into the city, and New York is now one of the most congested cities in the world. Ultrafine particulate matter, which gets into our lungs and our bloodstream, causing asthma, cardiovascular disease, and brain disease, is far worse along the highway in Brooklyn and Queens than elsewhere. But while some of that matter comes from tailpipes, the vast majority comes from the wear of tires on the road and road dust, which produce nearly 2,000 times the particulates and include over 200 chemicals, including known carcinogens. And so, these get worse as vehicles get heavier. So lest we believe that transitioning to electric vehicles is the panacea for air pollution, it is not, because electric vehicles are 20 to 30% heavier because of the weight of their battery. And so actually, all the space around our highway is going to have worse ultrafine particulate matter later than it does today. And so all of DOT's drawings of putting picnic tables and cafe tables under the highways, you're not going to want to be sitting there. And of course, the climate crisis is here, and we cannot drive our way to sustainability. So while vehicles make up between 25 and 30% of emissions, hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide emissions are in the embodied in the concrete and steel used to build these highways. So you can't build your way into net zero either. And far worse, the highway enables urban sprawl. So suburban areas generate 2 to 3 times more carbon emissions on a per capita basis than urban dwellers. And car dependency is really expensive. So the annual average now is currently about $10,000 per year are spent per car owner to own and maintain a car. And it's higher in New York City because of insurance. And last, but I don't think I need to convince anybody in this room about this, cars and car infrastructure are a terrible use of space and an enormously inefficient mode of mobility. So this space could be repurposed for something much more useful, like housing or transit or parks. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? All of these urban highways that Robert Moses created in the mid-20th century, they're 70 years old. All of them are crumbling. So the city needs a strategy for all of them, not just the BQE. We need a way forward that undoes all the damage that has been created, that shifts funding from highways to public transit and to communities, and rebuilding the community infrastructure that we had before the highways ripped it apart. And we need it for not just the BQE, but for the Cross Bronx, the FDR, and all of our urban expressways. And so we're in now a slow-moving earthquake. The triple cantilever is this 1.5-mile stretch of highway that is today's problem. But you know what? Tomorrow it's going to be the elevated section in Sunset Park, or it's going to be the sections in Red Hook or in Carroll Gardens, or the retaining walls of the trench are going to start to collapse. Each of these is billions of dollars of infrastructure investment. So this is the first of many. It's like the canary in the coal mine. So we're at, right now, a fork in the road, highway. And what we choose to do on this 1.5-mile stretch of highway is going to hard code what is possible for BQE North and South as we confront this same moment in each of those areas. And so we have to get this right. And the plans proposed by New York City DOT are a very, very expensive $5 to $10 billion rebuild of this Robert Moses Highway, which includes, by the way, a widening of the BQE. And we can and we must do better, and we must choose a better path today. So we need to think the entire corridor, and we need to come together with a multi-stakeholder coalition of federal, state, and local governments, including an authority that is going to be able to make decisions for the entire highway. We need to rethink it as a human-scale, sustainable piece of infrastructure for the future. And I'm not going to bore you with highway porn, but we have done this before. We've done it on the West Side Highway, we did it in Yonkers, they've done it in Seoul, they did it in Paris. None of those highway removals and and transformations have had a negative effect. In fact, they have all had positive economic impacts. So why not the BQE? It would be a tragedy to rebuild it. Thank you.
Hola, hola, buenos dias. Good morning, y'all. Hello. My name is Daniela Castillo. I made a comment similar to this at an event that Transportation Alternatives that we were at. It was like flurries were coming down, and it was a cold February morning, and I said something like, to have folks come out for something like this, or whether it's like a day-long symposium about the BQE, to me signals like an interest in transportation justice, as well as, to me, it signals like what must be an interest in environmental justice, right? And so this is what, the green button? All right. So I'm Dani Castillo. I'm the program director for the Green Light District program at El Puente. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But I was really struggling with what to focus on for these slides. We only have like 8 minutes, and I'm going to do my best to keep it quick. But I was really focusing on what to work on. Right? I have like a sketch of like my flow and narrative, and then I started thinking like the main focus is narrative, right? It's storytelling. It's this focus on collective storytelling and how we mobilize and how we organize and how we move to action, which is what El Puente has been doing for 40 years now. I don't have maps or any context setting. I really wanted to use this as a conduit to show all the brilliant work that our youth and community members have been working on around the BQE, which has been a protracted struggle in the context of Los Sures. But just to show really quickly, this is the viewpoint of from the Marcy station where the JMZ trains come. And this shows the trench context of where we're at in Southside Williamsburg with this portion of the BQE. But to share a little bit about El Puente, we, with this similar theme of like thinking about narrative and flipping the narrative, due to intentional disinvestment in the community of the south side of Los Sures in Williamsburg, in the 80s, there was a wave of, in the early 80s, wave of violence and loss of precious youth life due to gang activity, and community members came together to create and offer really precious space for youth to live out their full potential. And that's what El Puente has been offering and providing for the last 40 years. Today, we have 6 leadership centers across south side of Williamsburg, and in Bushwick also we have an incredible team in Puerto Rico that is focusing on climate justice work within the context of the Caribbean. We have the very first Academy for Peace and Justice and our Pride of the South Side, MS-50 Community School. And that's what we've been focusing on, right? We've been focusing on youth and community development, particularly through the arts. And this brings me to the GLD, which stands for the Green Light District. It's similar to this theme of like violent impositions on the neighborhood. In some 10 years ago, the co-founder Luis Gardner Costa recognized the ways in which development, imposed development, right, as opposed to focusing on community-led plans. A very awful 2005 rezoning led to increased gentrification and displacement because of development that focused on profit as opposed to providing housing for folks. He put together this vision for a green light district, which thinks about the South Side in this holistic way, thinking about the intersections of all of these 5 main areas of affordable living, environmental justice, health and wellness, education, arts and culture. And this is following a legacy of community rising up and battling harmful infrastructural projects in the South Side. For instance, battling the proposed construction of an incinerator, a trash incinerator, or coming together in coalition building to reduce the activity of a waste transfer site right along the waterfront. So this is kind of our community development and organizing hub that pairs with our Global Justice Institute, which focus a lot on liberatory pedagogy. So this leads me to some of our current campaigns. We've been continuing that legacy of EJ battles, and we've been focusing on a campaign called Our Air Nuestro Aire. And this was, through doing youth-led citizen science and air monitoring using these little guys. These are air monitors, air beams, doing air monitoring and awareness raising through cultural programs. We've been focusing on the impacts of harmful infrastructure on our health. And this is our platform, our campaign around that. So when this came about the BQE, we were ready, right? And I know Diana's here and we'll speak a little bit more about proposals for specifically the BQE, but we knew this day would come and we knew that we would do it and engage and mobilize with our flavor, our style, and our fashion, right? And so we've been taking this as an opportunity to continue focusing on youth development, cultural and arts organizing, and doing citizen science, right? So this is a group of our summer youth participants who went out, monitored 3 times a week, 2 times a day over the summer, using those little air beams, specifically looking at particulate matter 2.5. We've been focusing on that. We've been taking environmental justice walks. This is our incredible Alumni Leadership Institute, talking about the intersections, right, of like food justice, development, environmental justice, high rates of asthma because of the BQE, and telling it with their lived histories and perspectives. So we've been going for walks. We've been visiting art that we've done around this topic. Right here, we're at Rodney Playground, talking about how all of our parks and open spaces line the BQE. We're in a district in which we already lack green open spaces, and all of them are lining places where our elders, our youngest community members, our youngest ones, like they convene, and places where they should be going for respite or for fresh air are polluting them because of the way that the BQE runs through our community. We've been doing engagement with students at our local schools. This is a class from the Arbor School that we went on a walking tour, which of course spoke to the dangers of crossing this harmful infrastructure. And we filled in templates. We asked folks along the walks, like, what changes would you like to see as we're moving along? And I'm running low on time, but we've been also focusing on creation, artistic creation. Here I am with a group of our muralistas, an intergenerational mural group. We even read passages from the Power Broker. Like we've been talking a lot about the impacts of the BQE, and when we asked them, was any of the injustices you saw on our environmental justice walk surprising to you? They were like, it's not surprising, but I don't expect anything less, which is heartbreaking, right? They said, I don't expect anything less. They've essentially kind of like had accepted this fate, but that's where this conversation about flipping the narrative comes into play, where we ask them, how does this shift how you think about your community and how you see these imposed violences, right? And we have the power to shift this narrative, and we have the power to control the narrative around what should happen with this harmful infrastructure. Even with this work with the muralistas, we've been moving away from even what should we do with the BQE, but more largely questioning what is a world, right? So taking us to an even more visionary type of place. Blah, 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 I'm gonna keep going. But we've been continuing with this work. It's gonna continue. I know we're going into round 2 of the DOT process, but we've been continuing in our own way and mobilizing. And we know that we've actually begun discussions with other partners about what it would look like if we focused on a people's process around the BQE with an overall focus on what a holistic, comprehensive plan would be for all of the corridor, not just a piecemeal approach that separates north and south and central. And I know there's different ownership structures, but we have to look at this as a super deeply interconnected system, kind of like mycorrhizal networks, if y'all have heard of those, with mushrooms and trees connecting to one another through root networks. That's how we have to approach this. There's massive implications for what we do in regards to the BQE right now. And to go back to the conversation about the narrative, we have the power to do this, and we have to think about this for not only thinking about our specific context within Los Sures, but as an overall corridor and as an overall city. We have to think about the implications for our city as we move towards climate goals, as we think about the goals set by the CLCPA, and we have to coalition build. We have to be visionary in this, in addressing the harms and starting with the reparations that the most impacted communities deserve, but also thinking how we move away from depending on this transportation infrastructure. And it begins with storytelling, and it's important to do so with the arts. So that's what we're gonna continue doing, and that's what we know how to do at El Puente, and there's also an invitation for folks to join and respond to the call for this coalition building, and that's it. Thank y'all.
Good afternoon. I think I'm standing between you and lunch, so I don't want to delay. My name is Reyna, and I am the former Deputy Borough President in Brooklyn. I served in the Adams administration when he was Borough President. I took what was BQ Green with me because I had commissioned that study of decking the BQE in 2006. I want to just share the opportunity to be able to have brought that project was a hard line for me with the borough president. And so my point was, this is my priority, and if you have me as your deputy borough president, you inherit this project as well. Years later, he's now the mayor, and he hasn't forgotten. So I just wanted to share how appreciative I am that the BQE cantilever project is not just being considered for the cantilever, but it's also going to consider what would be the north and the south. And thank you to, I call them the Brooklyn Heights ladies, because they came over years ago to talk to me about all this funding. And we had an amazing conversation, a lot of behind the scenes details, but it's important that we build coalitions. What I don't want is waiting any longer. So I created what would be this presentation to be able to give you a sense of what you already know, right? The 1956 Federal Highway Act. Segregation by design is a fantastic imagery of what is walking along what was created. So thank you to Adam, whose great work continues. What you may not know is that 6 children were killed, and as sand caves in Brooklyn were digging what would be the BQE in Los Sures, Williamsburg. How many of you have ever visited Los Sures? Los Sures is in the south side. I was born and raised in this little section of Williamsburg, where the yellow line represents what was the BQE, dividing our community. And this particular slide is a representation of how 6 children died, but we don't talk about that because of this construction. Joe Lentil, who's the former assemblyman in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, remembers attending the funeral of these kids, Latinos and Jewish kids who were playing. This is the 1980s open space I had the luxury of enjoying. These are the parks that were issued as part of the BQE. And the opportunity to be able to play in these parks, I have a very vivid memory, my mother cannot believe I remember, of playing. She took us to the park. The bottom, 286 South 3rd Street, is where you had the Comfort House and the play area for children to enjoy, the swings, the jungle gym. And there was in an instant, we had to duck behind that Comfort House because there was a shootout between the police and perpetrators who were running through the park. Now, this was very common. The parks were what would be the safe haven for criminals, or the opportunity to be able to drug use, or the homeless to be able to have a good night's sleep. And so that was the last time I ever enjoyed a park. Never got to grow up playing in a park. The opportunities to be able to change that. I became the council member in 2001 in my own neighborhood, and representing the interest of what is repairing what is a divided community. And how do we do that? 2005 rezoning was an example of how I thought we were going to be able to champion open space. Now you have to understand the 2005 rezoning was a culmination of communities from Greenpoint and Williamsburg coming together. There was a study that was supposed to create a lot of open space in the area, but it didn't really include what would be our South Side community. And lo and behold, once the actual vote came around, I asked, where's our open space in the South Side? And they had no answer. They gave me what would be a small 25 by 100 piece of land along the BQE that was city-owned as open space. Once again, the inequity in our face. The opportunity to be able to have what would be that money that would have gone to that particular lot, I redirected and turned my energy and those resources into this study. D-Land Studio, Susanna Drake is the main consultant, and my request was not just to study the BQE, but really comprehensively understand we need affordable housing. What could that mean in this area? All those particular white structures were possibilities of affordable housing. The opportunity to be able to deal with traffic calming measures, because we had what would be terrible crossings without traffic lights, or very tight sidewalk spaces, or no medians. The opportunity to be able to see what would be an increase in public safety, create greener community, combat a public health crisis, asthma. Woodhull Hospital had studied our hospitalization rate. We were one behind or along with the South Bronx, suffering one of the highest hospitalization rates in all of the city. The opportunity, and keep in mind, it's not just that we have the BQE running underneath us, but we also have the elevated train, the J and the M. We have the entrance to Manhattan by the Williamsburg Bridge. So we have the BQE above us as well. Intergenerational recreational spaces was very important to our community. And I held Susanna Drake's hand as our consultant because I didn't want her to feel like this was just another community engagement. I love the way we throw around community engagement when it's really not community engagement. So I held her hand and I spoke Spanish so that there would be no divide or barrier in our community to get community input. The opportunity to be able to sit with them, and we had multiple levels of We even went to the park. Susanna thought, God, I've never done this before. You're really active, right? And we walked into the park and we started to talk to mothers with strollers. We spoke to our providers who take the group of kids that they care for in their home to the park. We were able to speak to seniors, and they gave the input. This is a culmination of community input. The opportunity to be able to have what is one-time events with the Parks Department is not what we're interested in. This was wonderful, but it doesn't exist today. This is how it was used in 2019. These are projects that have been worked on, started, and while we're still waiting and talking, they're happening throughout the nation. It started with the Big Dig when I started to study the BQE, to deck it. And the Big Dig was the only thing we had. But now we have all these projects, and I couldn't fit any more. But we have 11th Street Bridge Park. I spoke to their group. I spoke to the Clyde Warren Park in Texas. I spoke to people, this is a new one in downtown Peoria, Arizona. But I've been speaking to people across the nation. And the number one item that they continue to say is that their city and state are invested. Government bureaucrats are invested in these projects. Their mayors and their governors are funding these projects. Why are ours not? Community KPIs. We talk about key performance indicators. I like to say that keeping people involved is a KPI. Keeping people interested, keeping people interconnected, keeping people intrigued, keeping people informed, keeping people included. Those are the KPIs that we have to put forward and not forget and not put them last. And finally, I liked what Michael had said. He mentioned what would be a small experiment. Well, my point is that we can start with the BQ Green Project tomorrow. And it is all of our job, because we are government, to push the state and the city to work together so that they can start these projects. That small experiment is possible. My community is waiting, and it can be the example of how it can work. I've spoken to one too many deputy secretaries for the State of New York Transportation Department, one too many commissioners of DOT. I've spoken one too many engineers at the Department of Transportation. They stand in the way of progress, and we have to change that. Thank you.
Well, first of all, my name is Claudia Herasme, and first of all, thank you to all of you for your presentations today. And I can't help but notice and get excited about seeing so many young people speaking for their communities and really taking part, really engaging, not in a superficial way. Because as you all said, we all recognize you are the future, and any efforts that we do today are for your generation and the generations after you. So thank you. Obviously, you are community, this is the community panel, and so there was a lot of perspectives that were shared today. And not a surprise that the common theme is about how do you engage with community, how do you actually respond to community needs, how do you bring, and who do you bring to the table, right? And so I'm curious, I'm gonna take it a little bit of where Karen said it in terms of the community impact, which also I think wrap up very nicely with Diana's KPIs. And I'm curious to see, in terms of like more details of what can that look like, and in terms of all of your efforts, in terms of how do we bring not just the idea of community involvement, but how can we actually design it or measure it for the future? How do we know that we're in the right track?
So I'll take that first. So the way we do this is we have to have disruptive thinking, and we have to bring in our young people by organizing. Organizing on a community level, organizing with academia, organizing with vocation. Not everybody's going to learn the same way. I think one of the things we miss all the time is the opportunity to use the arts as an intermediary between you guys, architects, engineers, and the community, the ground people. There are so many ways, like I keep bringing up the fact when we were learning about air rights, and I could not understand the concept quick enough. But what we did was we went and got some Legos. And I said, well, you're gonna use these Legos and you're gonna show us exactly what you mean about air rights. So this way, we used the arts to really do what would have probably took 5, 6 workshops to do. We don't have that much time. So we have to be concentrated. We have to look at which one of the individuals in our communities wants to get into architectural design, urban planning, engineering, and we have to incubate them. When we talk about the Robert Moses issue in Red Hook, it was meant for bad, but it actually turned for good. I moved in Red Hook in 1982. We were cut off. Nobody visited us. But we took the opportunity to organize our community. We now have social cohesion and infrastructure that is beyond my wildest imagination for any community across New York or probably America. So take a model from Red Hook, come to Red Hook, let us tour you, let us talk to you, become our mentors, and we become your mentors.
Hi. I also just want to add on to what you said. We also have to stay proactive. You know, things change all the time. You know, what is today may not be what's tomorrow. So, you know, just to be ahead of everyone, we have to be adaptive to change. You know, things like this, like you said, we don't have that much time, but it can't happen overnight. You know, like I feel like people have been fighting for the same issues for years now. You know, and we just got to be more proactive. We have to get involved, stay involved, you know, make sure we add, like you said, like the youth, you know, like we're the future. Like we have a lot of words and ideas and stuff, and we just need a platform to say that, you know. And so I think this is an excellent opportunity, so I appreciate it.
Just want to push you a little bit because I'm trying to get to a particular thing, one thing that you think should be part of your community impact statement. Sort of like what's one metric?
The metric for me, I'll probably have to go back to the formulation of the Gowanus Neighborhood Coalition for Justice. The metric was to come up with our own plan, just like Red Hook did with the 197A plan. We're not waiting for you to tell us what to do. We will tell you what we want done. I believe that elected officials across all 3 government levels, they change and it's interchangeable. But what is constant is community. So we need community oversight task force that embody the principles around environmental justice, around green space, around making sure that we hold people accountable during the process of the adaptation and mitigation. You would not understand the noise that we have to deal with in Red Hook just with one job. It's making me very wary about how do we take down something like the BQE? Where does all that tonnage and waste go? The particle matter, when we talk about particle matter, as the woman from Brooklyn Heights said, and about the tires, well, you cut out trees. You cut out trees down for adaptation and mitigation for climate change. Those trees take 100 years to grow. Those trees are filters. That PM 2.5 was above the tree level. It would have been captured by the tree and waited for rain to actually go through the system of ecology and going out to where it needs to go. Now we're open. The noise is louder. The particle matter is more intense. And you guys have to start fixing that. We can't have that going on when the BQE comes down.
I applause. I do want to share, you know, one of the metrics, I used the study to help me and help us as a community be able to have a metrics outcomes that were doable. You know, the opportunity to see that the study concluded we were a tree desert. We had no or very little trees planted in the south side, in Los Sures. And that was contributing to poor air quality, in addition to the pollution, the particulate matter, the carcinogens that we're talking about. And so following the study, I was able to then focus on funding $1 million for 300 trees. Today, those are mature canopy trees. Just being able to see street-lined streets and blocks, to be able to understand that we're improving that air quality because of those trees. So that metrics had a triple impact, right? The opportunity to be able to do something about what was a negative impact and turn it into a positive. In addition to that, I would love to see what is this project, as far as BQ Green is concerned, become a study for recycling polluted air, right? Imagine that we were to be able to have this project become a research and development opportunity for recycling air, polluted air, right? From the BQE. We have to think big or go home.
So, you know, speaking on behalf of Brooklyn Heights, I think a lot about responsibility. And I think Brooklyn Heights didn't fight hard enough 70 years ago. We probably could have gotten the BQE stopped, right? My community probably could have said, Robert Moses, no, you're not going on our cantilever, you're not going anywhere, you need to not build this highway. And because the community said, all right, fine, you're not going to go through our neighborhood, we're going to put you on the cliff, and okay, fine, it's good enough. And we let him build. And I would like our community impact statement to be that we are not going to do that again, and we are not going to stop fighting until this thing is good for everybody along the corridor.
Well, Cindy, I think that you were the one talking about true transformation, and I think that I was curious to hear more about what that might look like in terms of, it almost feels like both, I had a Back to the Future moment, sort of like we're not going back to rebuild things, but there's things from the past that we can learn and maybe can help us solve this problem. At the same time, it sounds like you're also calling for a whole rethinking of mobility and connectivity. So can you give us a little bit more details of how that might look like?
All right, how long do we have?
In 2 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, the big trends we're seeing here are a shift away from car culture toward micromobility. So more e-bikes were bought in 2022 than electric vehicles. Younger generations are not getting their driver's licenses. And the shift is enormous from, boomers to Gen X. We all sort of got our license. That was part of growing up. And younger generations are not doing that. And so if you think of this as a 15-year project, if you think of BQE Central as a 15-year project, right? In almost 2040, we're going to be, ta-da, unveiling a new highway. And that's not good enough. And in 15 years, how do we want to be getting around the city? What kind of mobility do we want to be prioritizing? And I think it's micromobility, I think it's public transit, I think it's active transit. And, to take a really good example, Amsterdam used to be choked with cars. In the 70s, it was choked with cars. It was going down the same path that cities around the world were going down. And in the 70s, they said, what are we doing? And they started making steps. Every single step was to deprioritize cars. And here we are today with Amsterdam being a city that has a few cars, some cars, but primarily it is a clean, green, quiet, sustainable city where most people use active and public transit.
Thank you. That reminds me, there's the city in Spain, Pontevedra, that took the cars out of their city center. And it obviously took a while for people to adapt, but it is a reality today. So that brings me a quick question about the urgency of change right now, because there are, the ability of the community to, in Red Hook in particular, to connect to the rest of the city, to move through their neighborhood, versus, changes for the future of this infrastructure. So just want to give you an opportunity. I feel like I heard these pedestrian connectivities are a priority, but just want to hear from you, what are some of the today priorities that need to be addressed?
In terms of the BQE,
Right.
we need immediate action, I feel like by day, the BQE is literally falling down. So, we don't have that much time we got to do something quick, I feel like a solution that, I come up with, we need to make a more collaborative effort. We're all here sitting in the same room, speaking the same things. We need to connect, and we need to figure out ideas and ways to combat it together, because one organization can't do it by themselves. We're in a room full of more than 5-10 organizations. I'm sure we can all work together in order to come up with a bigger plan, to combat Robert Moses and his doings.
Sunset Park. So there's the Costco, right, on 39th Street. So a lot of families, they go to Costco to get their groceries and goods, and there's this, what needs to be prioritized is safety measures on 3rd Avenue, as I had mentioned. There's a specific spot, I keep trying to figure out what the name of it is, but there's no crossing, and there's no signage as to how to cross. Cars come, there's no, I believe there is a stop, but it's just a very unsafe area to cross. I'm not sure if anybody has actually been on 39th Street, but that's the Costco, and that's the closest, apart from Seatown, but Costco has more goods, and so a lot of families go there. As well, when I went on the BQE walk south, I'm not sure if it's relatable, but I could not find a trash can the whole way there. The whole way to Sunset Park from Red Hook, I did not find a trash can. I'm not sure if that's good, but I was holding my cup the whole time because I didn't want to litter. But like how Quincy had mentioned, when we were going also on the BQE walk, there was bolts. So we just found them on while we were going on the walk, and it's very unsafe. What if just children, family are passing by, and it's falling apart? So something has to be done.
Sorry, can I just make one quick note? I think we need to buy DOT a little bit of time, because we're in this sort of crisis moment with BQE Central, and we need to have the opportunity for federal, state, and local officials to get together and build a transformational plan. And so I think any real transformation involves doing what needs to be done on the triple cantilever to keep it going, while we buy time to put together this multi-stakeholder coalition to really think about the future.
This is where I don't agree. I believe we need to start now. A study was already completed. The BQ Green decking project, back then in 2010 when it was concluded, would cost $100 million. And when I proposed it, when I was still in government, to the de Blasio administration, they came back to say that they couldn't do it because it would cost $1 billion. They compared it to the Battery Park Tunnel. It's a 3-block stretch. These are street bridges that are 70 years old now. Back then, when it was studied, was 50 years old. Trucks are only getting bigger and bigger, and they can't use what would be the BQE because they get stuck under these street bridges. So the redesigning is immediate. And while we're redesigning, all of you lovely engineers who are so technical but don't see beyond the technical portion, you can transform and readapt use, but still preserve what is these street bridges as the foundation to open space. You still have your highway. Now, what I've been fed is that it can't happen because if we turn it into open space, then it's not a highway anymore. According to who, right? According to what? And so we cannot wait. What we need to do is start at where there's a point of reference, and if a study has already been concluded that this is doable, then use that as the small experiment, as Michael said, to then continue to study what is the possibilities of continuing, like Legos, to build out this transformational plan and design and construction.
I just want to follow up one thing, though, because we're talking, and it sounds so amazing, but on the ground, what I'm concerned with is where the alternate is going to happen. So we have the Gowanus Canal rezoning that's going to bring 10,000 new apartments along the canal. We have work going on the waterfront. If we have work going on the cantilever, where is those truck traffics? We're talking about Amazon. Amazon is trying their best, at least locally, in Red Hook. They're on rickshaws. They are bicycling. Forget about, let's stop doing diversion and pointing to Amazon. Let's talk about the trucks on the BQE and where are they going. Already in Red Hook, as a part of the resiliency, resilient Red Hook, and I love both sides of Red Hook, whether it's the public housing side or the IBC and the side that we have ownership. But what I can't allow as the representative of the public housing residents is for them to pivot the truck lane from their side to my side. Because now you're affecting the people that I'm responsible for elevating their voices. And so I'm gonna need the guy who did Racism by Design to come in early this time. Don't come in afterwards talking about redlining. Let's get in front of the red line with connecting truck traffic to what we're talking about here.
Do we have time for questions from the audience?
Bring it on.
So if there's any questions from the audience, we have a few minutes left. Here we have.
I'd like to hear more about this coalition, the local, the state, the federal. How can anything get done unless they're all working together? And then this sort of overarching panel or authority that will have total charge.
So, Hank was brought in as the hero in this BQE panel, right? I forget what it was called, Frank. Expert panel, of course. Very expert. And the opportunity to be able to see this expert panel come together, right? The same has to happen with government. And who takes the lead, right? Soon, I believe it's next month, HUD is going to be meeting with all the mayors of the nation. And is our mayor going to convey, we need the federal government. We need Pete Buttigieg to come in and make sure. Polly Trottenberg, our former New York City commissioner, who championed this money for the cantilever, should be coming home and sitting down with the state, the city, as a federal representative to be able to say, okay, guys, how do we get a plan in action? Similar to the Manhattan Project. Nobody leaves this room until we figure this out. Somebody has to, we need a Robert Moses in the room. That has to happen, because if not, if we leave it up to who's going to, raise their hand? This is an enormous project. Nobody wants to be blamed. Nobody wants the headache, and nobody wants the work. If we share that responsibility, then it is all possible. And I keep saying we cannot wait. We have to start with something because it'll spur that action of needing to get to the next step. Because we can be here for another 50 years talking about this.
Are there any other questions? Because, let me see, I had many questions. I think that perhaps the one I want to come back to, I think it was Danny that mentioned that you were advocating for spaces where people can live their full potential. And so I think that this goes back to this idea that this is not just an infrastructure problem, right? That this is about a city-making problem that then has to have all of these other complex systems working within. And so maybe the question is related to what is the possibility in terms of, once we have figured out, once we have come together, what is your personal visions for your neighborhoods? What does that look like?
So for my neighborhood, Red Hook, I don't often talk about what I want. I'm a consensus builder. I know that 40, 50 years from now, I won't be here. But what I want to do is I want to hear the consensus. And so when it's like a 50-50 argument, we have to dig deeper to get more people involved so that we can break that and come to consensus and have the proof that this is what the people wanted. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah, there are times that politicians have to make quick decisions, leaders have to make quick decisions, but we also have to keep on engaging the community, and we should be engaging them pretty much in grade school now. These kids are coming out, they're not coming out with their eyes closed anymore. You remember that back in the 70s and 80s, the baby kept their eyes closed for at least a week? These babies are coming out looking around like this now. And we have to capture the evolution of the mind and what's happening here on this planet. And so that is really talking to young people. I'm looking for the valedictorians in my neighborhood. I hate when people come to Red Hook and ask me, where's the kids who are, already been in contact with the police? I don't know. I really don't. The percentage of kids in that boat is very small. What happens is that people react when something happens, like when Patrick Daly unfortunately got killed in Red Hook. That has had a 30, 40-year impact on my community. What I'm trying to do is transform the mindset. I want you to look at people like me and recognize that given the opportunities, we are still creatives, just like anybody else. Any person who has a breath and is breathing on this planet, you are a creator. You are made in the image of a creator. And so we have to be a part of the creation of what's going to happen in New York City. And we can't just go pendulum swinging all the way to the left, all the way to the right. We have to come out with a consensus that we all can live with. And that's what I'm looking to accomplish in Red Hook.
Hello. I'm just following up of what Karen shared of taking so much inspiration and energy from the young people and from really perspectives from so many different lived experiences and our conversations together and imaginative world building that we've been engaging with through this work. When we looked to unearthing these truths and really grounding these truths in history and also lived experience through this process. And we looked to Adam's, the segregation by design blog. We looked to BQ Green. We looked to the ideas and solutions that had already been proposed and were in place and wanting to honor what was there and meeting folks where they're at. But we also, like, there was a moment of just remembering that we can really truly we can challenge what has been imposed on us. And having some sessions, the muralistas are mostly all high schoolers, right? And going on these walks together and then reflecting on it, sketching, writing about it. I was looking through some of their responses, and they are just it's just pushing the boundary of what I think sometimes when we've been through these processes, like sometimes we get, it's true, there are very realistic, there's realities that we have to face and live within, but they reminded me that we shouldn't limit ourselves in that way. There are some youth who were sharing about, not only is it very overwhelming with the noise pollution, the air pollution, not like having safe passages to move through, but they're also talking about the sensory experience as being exactly, and then when you're have a disability of sorts or have already it enhances all of that and exacerbates that. They reminded me to think through that, like from a disability justice viewpoint, and to always center, those most impacted or those, to think that way, which has been a constant reminder, thinking of families who move through these open spaces with carriolas, right, with like their carriages, and our young folks, our elders, and we even had one session with third graders from a nearby school, and when we asked them to draw in their visions, recognizing there have been community-led visions already, and we're not wanting to dismiss that, but like just thinking, just what's coming out of the imagination of youth, they drew in, areas for tree care, like that, rather than a job in society, but like roles that we play in our community, right? They talked about tree care. They talked about, here's a place to eat food because you'll be so tired from caring for trees, right? And then they said, and here's this place to rest, because even at this young age of being in the third grade, they have witnessed the way capitalism has run us down, and they're like, a place for people to rest because you'll be so tired, being overworked, And they even said a place for folks to rest who don't have homes. And these are third graders, right? And so through this process, it's been really like reminding us of that how much we can unlock when we don't limit our imaginations, but continue to be grounded by truths and lived realities and experiences. And I wanted to say to the earlier question about community community impacts, I'm also thinking about how do we also take account for like qualitative and quantitative, like the harm that has been caused, and repair that back, reparations, right? Like and then build community wealth. And I'm thinking like long-term too, like if we cap and deck in Los Sures, the trench, it's kind of restoring that potentiality to build community visions. And then how do we also think about thriving and longevity for communities that have long-time residents, right? I'm thinking about community ownership in this process too. So that's my long-winded answer.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? No. I think we're at time. So thank you so much to all of you for your great sharing. And I think there's probably lunch coming. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.